We may or may not be at a top secret location right now, but we still got to dive into these wide receivers and how we are ranking them week 16. Starting off tier 1, Tyreek Hill. Nothing to talk about outside of my own fantasy teams, which I know y'all got to hear about. Obviously, you don't care. I'm going to share anyway. I advanced a team to the semifinals in Best Ball Mania that has both Tyreek Hill and Jonathan Taylor. Yes, obviously, those guys did not play last week. So we are sending up prayers that they're going to play this week, and they should be at low ownership, elite level ceilings, and we may or may not have a shot at $3 million, ladies and gentlemen. Send up a prayer for me. Now, tier 2, we are going to go CeeDee Lamb in the same game going up against Miami. You have a 25-point applied team total. The over-under of this game currently is about 51.5, so it should be a super high-scoring game. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb's been great. Dallas offense imploded last week, and CeeDee Lamb still got there. A.J. Brown will be our next guy. Eagles have really struggled over the past 3, but should be a much better spot this week against the Giants. They played the Niners, they played the Bills, and they have played the Cowboys over the past 3 weeks. You have an implied team total over 27 points here for this team. I have no hesitation. And we'll go Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4. Clearly, Jared Goff dominated last week against a soft Denver Broncos defense, but you do have the Detroit Lions with an implied team total of 25 points against Minnesota, which is lower than what you have for the projection of the Eagles this week, and also lower than what you have for the projection of the Bills. We'll go Stephon Diggs here. Diggs really has done absolutely nothing over the past month, even though the Bills offense was phenomenal this past week. It was primarily just because they were able to go out there and run the ball over and over again. Maybe assume they do the same thing going up against the Chargers, but I mean, right now you do have the Buffalo Bills projecting out to be the highest scoring offense in the NFL this week, and Diggs is still dominating the target share in Buffalo. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Justin Jefferson at 6. If you're looking at Jefferson, completely understand if you wanted to go elsewhere. Personally, I think that I am just going to ignore the fact that we haven't had the blow up week in quite some time. This is a wide receiver that had the volume last week. Nick Mullins didn't look bad. This offense doesn't project to be that bad either. Great matchup against the Detroit Lions, 22-point applied team total. So yeah, I'm all in on Jefferson. Mike Evans is our next guy at 7 with Evans. Godwin had all the target volume last week. Evans still scores the points. Evans is going to get there almost every week regardless. Going up against Jacksonville, if you have no Trevor Lawrence, maybe we actually move Evans down just a bit, given the fact that you could assume that maybe you have a little bit more of a run-heavy focus if you are looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if they go up against the team with no Lawrence. Michael Pittman will be your next guy at 8. That same team where we have shot at $3 million on Underdog, we have Michael Pittman on it as well. So what we need this week is a big Pittman week, a big Tyreek week, and a big Jonathan Taylor week. Like we said, those guys should be at low ownership for the semifinals round because they didn't really do anything last week. Yeah, Michael Pittman, I'm assuming that he's going to be good to go. He played on Saturday, and reports are saying that the concussion is not looking too severe. We'll go Rashee Rice at 9. If you're looking at the usage that Rice has had, I mean, this man just continues to increase. And I'm not too concerned about what you are going to have with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. They're going up against the Raiders here. Patrick Mahomes is a pick 'em of 269.5 passing yards for Underdog. Now, our next guy will be a pair of teammates. We are going to be going Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. You can make an argument that you want these guys even higher than this. The issue is going to be they're going up against the Baltimore Ravens. So it is a super tough matchup overall, right? If you are looking at these two wide receivers. But the Niners are the best offense in the NFL, and you can start these guys with confidence every week. Nico Collins will be our next guy. With Nico, we're going to assume that CJ Stroud plays. With Nico Collins, I definitely want to make sure that we are continuing to monitor the injury reports. And if you have Nico just fully good to go, I think you can move him up even a little bit higher than this. I just want to make sure that he will be good. Then our next guy will be DJ Moore. If you are looking at DJ Moore going up against the Arizona Cardinals, it is a beautiful matchup where you have a 24.5-point implied team total for the Chicago Bears. So despite the fact that you just have Justin Fields disappointing over and over again, DJ Moore is still getting there, and this offense should be much better than this week than you're used to. Cooper Kupp and Puka will be our next two wide receivers. I think you have to rank Kupp ahead of Puka at this point. I mean, this is going to be a team that plays on Thursday. If you go over and look at the Underdog pick'em, so what you have for these guys right now, you have Cooper Kupp at 69.5 receiving yards for his more than less than, and you have Puka down at 61.5. So if you want to scream at me that no, Puka should be the wide receiver one, just take it up with Underdog. Go take more than 61.5 receiving yards on Underdog. And then also over there, you have a Matthew Stafford free pick'em for the Thursday game, more than less than half a total yard going up against the New Orleans Saints. If you are new to Underdog Fantasy, use promo code FLOCK. You'll get that special Matthew Stafford pick'em, a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. Now, Garrett Wilson is someone that always has volume and is someone that's always in one of the worst offenses in the NFL, so he's difficult to trust. However, if you're looking at what we have specifically for this matchup, going up against Washington, this is the highest I've ever seen the New York Jets offense project out. They're currently at 20.5 points for their implied team total. So just given how good the matchup is for Garrett Wilson here, I do think that Garrett Wilson will be a must-start guy this week. We'll go Keenan Allen at 17. There's still a really good chance Keenan doesn't play. He did not practice today, or Tuesday, that is. I'm recording this on Tuesday. It's a tough matchup going up against Buffalo. Clearly, this is one of the worst offenses in the NFL. You have an implied team total of about 16 points. Keenan has no reason to come back and play. I mean, it's not like he's really playing out for a new contract or anything. I mean, he doesn't have to prove anything at this point. The team's completely out of it. If he's not 100% healthy, I wouldn't play if I was Keenan Allen. So we'll see if he's good to go. If he is, probably play him. Jalen Waddle will be our next guy. Jalen Waddle should be in a shootout. Obviously, he was a must-start player last week with no Tyreek Hill. I'm making these rankings under the assumption that Tyreek plays. If Tyreek misses, then you move Jalen Waddle up closer to someone like Mike Evans. And then we're going to go Devontae Adams at 20. Devontae Adams does have a tough matchup going up against KC. Right now, his Underdog pick'em's actually at about 70.5 receiving yards, however. So, I mean, if you are looking at that, they are telling you to go through and put Devontae Adams ahead of someone like Puka Nacua. I just have a hard time when the implied team total is about 15.5 points. And obviously, this is a wide receiver that's been a little bit more streaky, and it's a really tough matchup. DK Metcalf will be our next guy at 21. I hope that Geno Smith plays. If Geno plays, then I think you can move DK Metcalf up these rankings. I just want confirmation that Geno's going to play before we make that call. Devonta Smith will be our next guy at 22. I mean, if you're looking at Smith, the issue is when Dallas Goedert has been in here, he has taken some more targets, and Smith's been sitting there more so as a secondary option. Whereas in those games where you have no Dallas Goedert, obviously Devonta Smith is someone that you can rely upon every single week. Amari Cooper will be our last guy in this tier at 23. Now, when I was making this video, I really wanted to just combine two tiers into one. I really think you have that top tier of the top 5-ish guys. And then after that, 6 through 23 are all very similar. And honestly, if you wanted to make an argument, Mason, I need to play Amari Cooper. Joe Flacco's been great with passing volume. Amari's looked great over under receiving yards this past week. I need to play Amari over Keenan Allen. I need to play Amari over Garrett Wilson. I need to play Amari over anybody in the tier above. Will be a little bit harder to make that argument, but they are very close. So when you're using these rankings, just obviously make your own call here. I mean, this is just what I am thinking initially. I will update these later in the week with the flex rankings, but 6 through 23 are very close together. I mean, it is incredible how flat of a tier you have that wide receiver group. Now, our next guy will be T. Higgins. With T. Higgins, we are operating under the assumption that you are not going to have Jamar Chase this next week. Now, if Chase does play, Higgins will move down a little bit further. Right now, his Underdog pick'em's at about 59.5 receiving yards, and you have a 1.5x multiplier if he scores a touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins will be our next guy at 25. With Hopkins, it's going to be a little bit shaky with the offense every single week. I mean, this is a spot where you have a high ceiling, a low floor, and it's very difficult to know exactly what you should expect. Calvin Ridley will be our next guy at 26. Now, right now, it does look like Lawrence is going to play. I do want to continue to monitor this situation and make sure that Lawrence is going to be good to go. And if Lawrence is good to go, I think you can move Calvin Ridley possibly to the tier above this, where the target volume will be consistent with no Christian Kirk. Now, with that being said, I mean, it was a very tough matchup going up against the Baltimore Ravens last week, or it should be a much easier matchup going up against the Bucs this week. Courtland Sutton will be our next guy. Sutton, tough matchup. Sutton, you're really just going touchdown or bust. Obviously, he's not a player that has had a tremendous amount of volume this season, but he has been viable just given the fact that he is going out there and scoring relatively often. I mean, hell, he's at 62.5 receiving yards on Underdog, so he's actually higher than someone like Puka. You'll know I just have never been a big Sutton fan, so maybe you want to ignore me. Maybe I'm a little bit biased here. And then Zay Flowers will be our next guy at 28. Zay Flowers will usually be a lot higher than this. I mean, with Zay Flowers, since you've had no Mark Andrews, he's been a very consistent target here for Lamar Jackson. My only hesitation is it's a really tough matchup going up against the Niners, where typically we're used to seeing the Ravens have an implied team total of about 24, 25 points. Now it's hovering at about 20.5. So just because of the matchup against the Niners, we'll be a little bit more concerned. Then our next tier will be led off with Jaden Reed at 29. With Reed, I want to make sure that Christian Watson's not playing. If Watson is playing, I'll be way more hesitant to go out there and put Jaden Reed at this point. Should be a lower scoring contest going up against the Panthers, where obviously the Panthers aren't someone you're excited about or think that they're going to score a lot of points. Noah Brown will be our next guy at 30. With Noah Brown, great this past week with no Nico Collins and no CJ Stroud. So maybe you want to go back to Noah Brown now that you have CJ Stroud coming in. My only hesitation is it's a tough matchup going up against Cleveland. If you have Nico Collins in here, does the target volume look exactly how it did last week for Noah Brown? In my mind, it probably doesn't. That's something I definitely want to confirm. But if you have no Nico Collins, I think you move Noah Brown up into the same tier with guys like Metcalf, Adams, Olave. Godwin will be our next guy at 31. I know it's incredibly low to rank Chris Godwin here, and I'm going to continue to rank him as a mid-wide receiver 3. I mean, definitely someone that you can play based off matchups. He's had volume all season. I know he's great this past week, but if you take a step back, I mean, it's not like he's been a super consistent option all year. JSN will be our next guy at 32. We talked about JSN being a potential playoff league winner, given both his schedule and the fact that I believe he is a super talented prospect coming out of Ohio State. Thought he was going to continue to get better as the season goes on. It's really nice to see what we ended up having this past week against the Eagles. The volume wasn't there, though. He only had like 5 targets. So if you're like in an underdog best ball tournament, I think you'd be excited about JSN and maybe he pops off. But from a regular redraft perspective, in my mind, it'll be much tougher to get excited. We'll go Drake London at 33, inconsistent option with a very weird offensive environment. Terry McLaurin at 34. I know this is going to look extremely low, but if you are looking at Terry McLaurin, it is about the worst matchup you could ask for going up against the Jets. So we have a couple just statement rankings down here with guys like Terry McLaurin, Hollywood Brown, Jordan Addison. I know Addison coming off a massive week, and he has a good matchup this week as well. I know a lot of people are going to look at this and say, Mason, you are way too low on these guys. And it's a very fair argument. I think any of these players in the bottom 3, you could rank as high as about 24, 25. I more so just want to be planting a flag and saying, I don't want people rushing to start these players. Just because Terry McLaurin had a great week last week doesn't mean you should rush out there to start him against the Jets this week. Just because Jordan Addison popped off last week doesn't mean you should rush to go out there and start him coming off a game with 6 targets. Same thing with JSN. Just because JSN popped off doesn't mean we should rush to go out there and start him coming off a game with 5 targets. So I'm rooting for these guys. And in reality, we probably should rank JSN up at 29, Addison at 29, Terry maybe at 29, Godwin maybe up there in the low 20s as well. It's just more so a statement ranking, trying to say, let's be a little realistic with these players. But I think that's all I have for y'all in this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please go down there, drop a like. I know you're already subscribed. And if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the description in the comment section. Promo code FLUCK, get a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And if you want to scream that we're way too low on someone like T. Higgins, you can find the more than less than 59.5 receiving yards over on Underdog. Promo code FLUCK, 100% deposit match, our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And that Matthew Stafford special pick on more than less than half a total yard. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.